You are listening to the Becoming the Wealthy You podcast with Jermaine Foley. If you're a woman who makes good money in your career or business, but you're not building wealth like you want to, then you're in the right place. In this podcast, you'll learn how to stop overspending, break free from the cycle of debt, save lots of cash, and become the wealthy woman you were born to be. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are talking about a very important topic, which is the skill of getting out of debt and staying out. I have a question for you. Have you ever paid off your credit card debt only to find yourself right back in it just a few months later? If so, I want you to know that you are not alone. This is a cycle that I see over and over again with my clients. A lot of women come to me and start working with me inside of my coaching program, the Wealthy Woman's Academy, because they know that on paper, they make good money and they should be so much further along. But credit card debt and just debt in general is one of the things they just can't seem to break free from. And so today's episode isn't going to just be about paying off debt. Anybody can pay off debt, right? It's actually going to be about staying out of debt, in particularly credit card debt for good. Okay, in my experience, I've seen a lot, right? I just told you that a lot of women come to me because they can't break free from the cycle of credit card debt. They also have trouble saving, and there's a lot of overspending happening. Those are the three things that I specialize in: helping you to get your spending under control and not use your money as an emotional fix to make yourself feel better. No one will ever be able to become super wealthy or wealthy if they use their money to alter their emotions. Because listen, as humans, we live in a world where we will always have negative emotion. We live in a world where negative emotion is just a part of the human experience. And if we're always trying to escape it, we are going to keep ourselves just getting by with money. We're going to keep ourselves in a frustrating pattern where we can't break free from the cycle of debt, where we can't save a significant amount of money, and where we just can't build wealth like we want to. And so that is one of the main reasons why so many people find themselves stuck. Another reason is because a lot of folks use their credit cards to live beyond their means. So they use their credit cards to expand their lifestyle beyond their income. And a lot of times we don't even know we're doing this, but we're doing it. And then the final reason is that we're relying on our credit cards as an emergency fund. So let me recap those. You're using your credit cards for emotional spending, you're using your cards to live beyond your means, or you're using your cards to act as an emergency fund. And we're going to dig deeper into all three of these in a minute. But what I want you to know is that getting out of debt is one skill. That's one skill that you guys need to learn. But then there's another skill that you also need to learn, and that is the skill of staying out all together. Okay. And we're going to cover both today. And that's why I titled this podcast, The Skill of Getting Out of Debt and Staying Out. Now, before we get into the strategy around getting out of debt, I really want you to understand what's keeping you stuck in the cycle in the first place. And I named a few of those things. And now let's go ahead and go a little deeper. The first one is we use our credit cards to spend beyond our means. Credit cards make it so easy to spend more than you earn. It's just super easy to do because a lot of times we swipe our cards and we don't even know that we're doing it. And you could think about this, like if you're in a habit of constantly swiping your card for this and that, or, if you're indulging in retail therapy or something like that, you don't realize how fast those charges add up. And before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even pay this all off this month. So let me just make a payment on it. And that is when the cycle begins. So if you find yourself consistently in credit card debt, one of the questions you want to reflect on is, am I using my credit cards to live beyond my means? Okay. And even for women who make good money, this is a thing, right? You can use your credit cards to spend more than you make and you don't even realize you're doing it. And awareness, we're going to talk about this a little later as well, but awareness is the first level of change. And so if this is something that is preventing you from breaking free from the cycle of debt, you have to become aware of it. So reflect on the question. Am I using my credit cards to spend beyond my means? Am I using my credit cards to spend more than I make? And if the answer is yes, you will always be stuck in credit card debt. And so you really want to reel that in and decide that I'm no longer going to use my credit cards as a way to spend more than I make. The second reason why you keep finding yourself in debt is because you're using your credit card as an emergency fund. If you do not have savings, any unexpected expense goes straight to a credit card. If that is you, you are going to find yourself stuck in the cycle of debt because let me tell you something. Life will happen. That's why I call it a life happens fund. You need a life happens fund for when life happens. When you have a car repair, a home repair, or a medical bill, anything that can just come out of the blue, you need money set aside just for those moments because we know they're going to happen. And when we are not prepared, we find ourselves reliant on credit cards. And so if you reflect and say, oh, the reason why I'm in debt is because every time I have a car repair, every time I need new tires, every time something goes wrong with the house and I need to call a plumber, anytime the kids have an unexpected activity, I'm always putting it on my card, then you may want to consider instead building up a life happens fund or emergency fund. And I recommend that you have at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses so that you are prepared when these things happen because they will happen. And using your credit cards for them is not always going to be the best way to go because it will keep you stuck in the cycle of credit card debt. Now, here's what I will say. There's nothing wrong with actually paying for those repairs or emergencies with your credit card and then using the money you have set aside in your life happens fund or your emergency fund to actually pay it off. Like that is totally fine. But what I'm talking about is you not having any money set aside in a life happens fund or an emergency fund, and then you use your credit card as a way to cover whatever expense that was, and then it takes you months to pay it off. And so not only are you paying for the repair or the emergency that occurred, but now you're paying interest on top of that, and that interest is compounding against you. The third reason so many of us find ourselves stuck in the cycle of credit card debt is because we use our credit cards for emotional spending and impulse spending. And a lot of times we justify it in the moment by saying, I deserve it, or I'll figure it out, or I'll take care of it later. And so anytime we feel stress, boredom, frustration, or any type of trigger that makes us want to buy something, we could receive an ad, we can just get triggered in any way, then we just whip out our credit cards and we just buy the thing without thinking twice. And so to figure out if this is your issue, then you should reflect and just ask yourself, is this why I'm always in credit card debt? Is it because I'm just spending whenever I have a bad day, whenever I'm stressed, and I put it on my credit card, and by the end of the month, I've done that so many times that I can't even pay the balance off? And if that is you, don't beat yourself up. Give yourself lots of grace because remember, awareness is the first level of change. So just become aware of it and recognize those emotional triggers and start just being aware of them. Once you start to see them, you can't unsee them. And remember, reflection and just recognizing like which one of these resonate with me, which one of these are the reasons why I find myself always in credit card debt, even when I pay them off. Maybe you get a windfall, maybe you get a commission or a bonus at work and you pay them off. But then a couple months later, just like I said at the very beginning, you find yourself right back. There's something going on. There's a habit loop that you're stuck in. In order to get out of it, you have to become aware of what it is. And then the final one I'll touch on is this mindset that I'll just figure it out later. I'll just pay it back later. And this is a way that a lot of us high achieving women who already make good money, this is how we justify anything that we want to buy. We're just like, I'll just make more money. I'm getting a bonus. I'll pay it off next month. You push the can down the road. And here's what I'll say about that. I love that we know that we can make more money. And I'm all about us making more money. But that is not a strategy for managing your money, right? Because you make enough money right now to be a lot more wealthy than you already are. And so whenever we give ourselves that little mental excuse of, I'll just make more, I'll just figure it out later, I'll pay it off with my next bonus, I'll pay it off with my next commission check, I'll pay it off, I'm making more, I just got a raise, I can afford it. All of those little thoughts that sound so abundant, they sound so empowering, but what they're doing is they're keeping you stuck in the cycle of debt. And so, yes, you'll make more, but let's manage the money you have right now, because the key to building wealth is not necessarily making more, especially if you're already high earning. The key to building wealth is making smart choices with the money that you have now. And then when you make more, you'll be in the habit of making smart decisions for that money as well. Okay. So when we kick the can down the road and say, I'll figure it out later, I'll make more. No, your habits are not going to allow you to do so. How you treat the amount of money you have right now is how you're going to treat the amount of money that you have in the future. So you have to start practicing good money management skills now if you also want to do it in the future. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be waiting on that next bonus or that next paycheck or that next raise as a way to tell yourself that, oh, I'll figure it out in the future. This is one of the biggest mindset traps that I hear from higher earning women is that I'll just make more, I'll figure it out. And we never do, because the truth is you need to figure it out now so that you can be better in the future. Okay, so now that we know the different scenarios and mindsets that are keeping us trapped, let's talk about the levels of change and how to actually get out of debt and stay out. Now, one of the things I really want to point out before we get into it is that debt isn't just about the numbers. It is about changing your mindset and your behaviors in order to create lasting change, right? Because if we were really doing math, we wouldn't be in debt, right? Because when you look at how much compounding interest works against you, you wouldn't do it. You would never do it. But the truth is we're not really doing math right now because money is probably 80 to 90% psychological and only 10 to 20% math. Okay, so let's not think that, oh, well, I'm just going to do the math and figure it out. No, this is way deeper than just the math. We're going to talk about some math in a little bit, don't worry. But this is way deeper than just the math. So in order to get to the point where we do the math, we gotta learn and understand the levels of change that we must go through psychologically. So the first level of change is awareness. And I mentioned this earlier. You have to wake up to the cycle. You have to wake up to the habit loop that you're in. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. So ask yourself, do I consistently rely on credit? Am I spending more than I make? Do I avoid looking at my debt because it feels overwhelming? Am I using my credit cards to allow emotional spending? Am I relying on my credit cards for an emergency fund instead of building up the discipline to save up for emergencies and when life happens? So the first level is awareness, because if you don't see it, you cannot change it. But on the flip side of that, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So become keenly aware of what's preventing you from breaking free from the cycle of debt. For a lot of us, it's overspending. For some of us, it's because we don't have any savings. And others of us, it is just because we're living beyond our means. Okay, so the second level of change is intention or wanting to change. Now, many people just stop here. They say, I want to do better. I need to do better. This is something I really need to be working on. I hear it all the time from women who hear what I do and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to work with you. Oh my gosh, I need more of that. I need to do this. But intention is not enough to change, but it is the start. It's the second level, right? So wanting to change is better than not wanting to change. But I just want you to know that wanting to change is not enough. You have to go to level 3 if you really want to change your life. And that is to make a decision. You make a decision and you commit to living a life that is credit card debt-free or debt-free in general. I remember when I first started to allow myself to use credit cards again, because you all know my husband and I, we paid off over $200,000 worth of debt. And for that entire period, I never ever used credit cards. And then I decided that, you know what? I think I want to dip my toe back into using credit cards because I want to be able to take advantage of the perks. You know, I want to be able to get free flights and hotel points and all that good stuff. And I started using credit cards. And for like the first 6 months, I don't think I've ever shared this before, but the first 6 months, I found myself overspending on my cards, overusing them, putting more things on them than I could afford, right? And so it was a little annoying. And I almost wanted to just say, you know what? Never mind. I'm just not using credit cards again. But instead, I went through these levels of change. I became aware of what my issue was. My issue was I was just putting random things on credit cards. I was using it for overspending. I was using it unintentionally. Instead of just putting the normal things I would buy on a credit card, I was putting like everything on credit cards, and it just got out of hand. So the first step was awareness. Like, okay, why am I even in this cycle? And then the second step was intention. I was like, I want to be able to use credit cards wisely. I want to be able to take advantage of the perks. So I really want to figure this out. But at the same time, I don't want to pay interest. I want to pay off my cards every single month. I don't want to carry a balance. So that was my intention. And then my next level was just to decide I was never, ever going to carry a balance on my credit cards ever again, period. I literally made that decision at the end of 1 year, because I was reflecting and setting, goals for the next year. And then boom, January 1st hit. It was a done deal. And I never, ever let a balance roll over from month to month. And it was just a decision that I made in that moment. And then I stuck with it. And when you make a decision, it means you cut off all other options. It was like, this is the only way. So I had to make some decisions alongside of that main decision so that I can make good on it, right? So for me, it was only really putting things on cards that I was already going to buy. And if I did spend on the card for like my personal things, I knew I only could spend what I already allotted myself that month. So I wasn't overspending on my cards anymore. And then the fourth and final level of change is to be disciplined, right? So once you make that decision, you decide over and over again, you are disciplined. So this was January. I made that decision, and then I had to do it again in February, and I had to do it again in March, in April, in May. And it was a discipline that I had committed to. And once I did it a few months, guess what? It was just a new habit. Now I can't even fathom paying interest for my credit cards. Like I double check every month. I'm like, nope, no interest, no interest. And I love seeing when you get your statement, like interest charges, and it's always zero. I'm like, yes, I'm taking advantage of the cards and they are not taking advantage of me. And so again, the 4 levels of change is 1, awareness, 2, intention, 3, decision, and then 4, discipline. And as you walk out that decision over and over again through discipline, you create a new habit, and that just becomes the person that you are. Because you made a conscious decision every day to stay committed to the decision that you made. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about 3 different strategies that you can use to actually pay off your debt and to stay out. Now, my favorite strategy is the debt snowball. This is what I use to pay off over $200,000 worth of debt. And this is where you pay off the smallest debt first for psychological momentum. So you list all your debts from the smallest amount to the largest amount, and you pay them off in that order. This is how I recommend my clients pay off debt. And this is how I did it, because it gives you those psychological wins and it motivates you to keep going. The other strategy that some people use, especially if you're thinking about math, is the debt avalanche. This is where you pay off the highest interest debt first. And honestly, this could save you more money over time, but it can feel slow in the beginning. And sometimes when you start off slow, it's hard to stay motivated and it's hard to keep that momentum. And so sometimes people give up. This is why I favor the debt snowball over the debt avalanche. But if you keep the momentum going and you keep going strong, you can save money, but really it's probably not that much. And again, like I said earlier, if we were doing math, we wouldn't be in debt in the first place. So let's choose the one that works best for you. And if you're somebody like me who likes to feel motivated and get those psychological wins, you may want to go with the debt snowball. Now, there's another method that I have come up with because I know sometimes we go into debt for reasons that we don't feel good about. And I call this the annoying debt first method. And sometimes like you can take out a loan from a family member, or there could just be this thing that you put on credit and you just wish you didn't do it. Maybe you bought an item for an X on credit and now you have to pay it off. Or maybe, someone told you they would pay you back if you put this item on credit and they never did. And you just feel a little bit bad about it and you just want it out of your life. It's like bad energy. Then pay that one off first and then choose the debt snowball or the debt avalanche for the rest of your debts. Because sometimes you just need to get rid of those debts that are just annoying and you just wish you never ever went into debt for that reason. And so this is a way to kind of account for that. Now, the other thing you really want to think about here is that you don't want to keep adding to your debt. If you are stuck in the cycle of credit card debt, a lot of my clients, they come to me and they have multiple credit cards and they're trying to get out. Then one of the things I highly recommend you do is to stop putting things on your credit cards. Let's get them all paid off, all cleaned up, stop putting stuff on them. And then once you're out of credit card debt, we can slowly start using them strategically, like the way I talk about using them, especially if you want to use them the way I teach you to use them in episode number 117, which is all about the skill of handling credit cards, right? So once you get them paid off, then you can take the time to learn how to handle them properly and how to take advantage of the points and the perks and all of that. But first, let's get the credit card debt cleaned up, and then we can go back and figure out how to use them in a way that actually works for you instead of against you. And finally, I'm going to reiterate a couple of things I already mentioned. Number one was build up an emergency fund. Do not rely on your credit cards as your emergency fund. And then number two is to really learn how to manage your overspending. And if this is something you want help with, I have a course called the Stop Overspending course. You can learn all about it right in the show notes or go to jermainefoley.com/SOS, because overspending and impulse spending and emotional spending is one of the main reasons why so many of us find ourselves stuck in the cycle of debt. And so that course is a course that will help you to get to the root cause of why you're overspending, impulse spending, and emotionally spending so that you can change your life for good. All right. So before I go, let me do a quick recap. Number one, getting out of debt isn't just about money. It is about changing your habits, your mindsets, and your daily decisions. Make a decision. Decide to become debt-free. Choose your payoff method. Is it going to be the debt snowball, the debt avalanche, or the annoying debt first method? Pick the one that makes most sense to you and that works for you. You know my favorite, but we are all different and we have to pick the one that works best for us. And then again, I'm going to say it again, build up an emergency fund. Your credit card should not be your emergency fund. You need to have an emergency fund and a high yield savings account filled with cash so that when life happens, you are prepared. That's why I like to call it a life happens fund, so that when life happens, you feel comfortable and confident knowing that you are prepared. And yes, you can use a credit card to cover that expense and then go right into your life happens fund and pay off that credit card that month so that you are not paying interest on the expense you had to incur. All right. Here's my final thought. Becoming debt-free isn't about deprivation. Remember, we can do both. We can build wealth and enjoy life. And a part of building wealth is getting free from debt, because paying off debt increases your net worth. So becoming debt-free isn't about deprivation. It's about giving yourself the financial security and peace of mind that you deserve. The sooner you start, the sooner you can experience what it feels like to truly be in control of your money. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye-bye. Wait, before you go, have you checked out my free class? It's all about the steps you need to take if you want to build wealth without going on a strict budget. To sign up, simply go to jermainfoley.com/wealth class. That's Jermaine with a G, foley.com/wealth class. See you in there.